So let's talk about whether or not you should use the word narcissist in court. The short answer is probably not. There could be times that you could use the word narcissist in court, but for the most part, what you want to do is use the information that you have to prove that the person is not necessarily a good person. And here's why. When you're dealing with judges, you are dealing with a judge who probably has hundreds of cases on their docket, literally hundreds. I know in most counties and most jurisdictions, there are hundreds of cases, of divorce cases, new cases, filed a day, every single day. And just think about how many family law judges are on the bench in your particular jurisdiction. It might be 1, it might be 20, but even if it's 30, and there are hundreds or thousands of cases filed a day, those cases are being assigned to those judges on a daily basis. And so those judges are having to deal with thousands of people getting a divorce, thousands. And those cases don't even count the cases where people come back to enforce issues where there might have been a problem before. Somebody's not paying something they're supposed to pay. Somebody's not obeying the terms of the agreement or going along with the terms of the agreement. And it doesn't also include any of those modification actions. So people who are going back to try to change the parenting plan or try to change the child support or try to change the amount of alimony or anything like that. So enforcement and modifications are not even included in that number that I'm telling you of hundreds or thousands of new divorce cases. So the judges literally are overwhelmed, backed up. They have way too much on their plate, way too many cases on their docket. And judges, by the way, are evaluated. They're evaluated by the judicial system, and they're also evaluated by the voters who voted them in if they were voted in the first place and not appointed by a governor or something like that. But they're still going to be evaluated. They're going to be evaluated on how quickly they get cases off of their docket and also how many times they are appealed. So I give you all of that background because I want you to understand that for those of you who have children, you understand that when your kids, if you have more than one kid and they're fighting with each other and they come at you and they go, he did this to me, she did that to me, she started it, he started it. What's your first reaction going to be? Your first reaction is going to be, both of you just stop it. Both of you just get along. Just get along. And so most judges, they just don't want to have to deal with it. They hear finger pointing, they see finger pointing, they hear complaints about spouses on a daily basis all the time, and they're like, over it. They just want the case off their docket. And remember, when you do get to go to court, you're going to have a very short window of time to present your case, to look like the good one, to be the one that the judge potentially likes better. Remember, judges do apply the law, but they are human beings underneath those black robes. They have biases. They decide they like someone. They decide they believe someone, whatever it is. You get a very short window of time to present your case. And a lot of times people will say to me, I have 50 witnesses that'll show that this person is a bad person. Okay, well, but when you think about that in terms of a realistic presentation to the court, you have to remember that in order to present a witness to the court, you have to have time on that judge's docket. And hours and hours and hours of time on the judge's docket translates to hours and hours and hours of money and fees that you're spending for your attorney. And if you put 50 witnesses on your witness list, then the other side is going to want to depose every single one of those witnesses. So when it comes to, going in front of a judge and saying, that person's a narcissist, The better way to do it, the judge is just going to go, okay, they're all narcissists. Everybody's a narcissist. That's basically what they're going to think. So what you need to do is put it in light of something that the judge is actually going to care about, such as custody. If, the judge has the obligation to come up with what's in the best interest of the children, what's going to be the best parenting plan, what's going to be the best custody arrangement, who should have decision-making authority about the children's issues, or something like that. And so when they're looking at those things, they're going to go, okay, has this person put the children's needs before their own? Has the person encouraged a relationship between the children and the other parent? Has this person been respectful to the other parent? I'm sure in wherever you live, wherever you are in the world, there is some law around how the judge is going to figure out what's going to be best for the children. So it's going to be better for you to take a look at those laws, whatever they are, and present evidence in light of those laws that shows that this person is not necessarily a good parent. And you can do that without just saying that person's a narcissist. Now, if you want to say that person's a narcissist and you really want that word to be presented to the judge, then it's going to be better served to do it in the context of either a psychological evaluation or a custody evaluation that's done by a psychological professional or mental health professional who then says, I did psychological testing on these parents and here are the results that I found. And it's going to be in the context of a full-on report that's probably going to be 30 or 40 pages, and it's going to have tons and tons of information and supporting documentation as to how that mental health professional came up with that diagnosis of that person. But even so, remember that narcissism is not illegal, and it is not grounds for taking children away from parents. I mean, I know it feels like it should because they're heinous beasts, but the better way for you to attack using the word narcissist or showing narcissistic traits in court is showing why the judge should care about this person's bad traits. So whether it's in the context of, property division, or maybe it's in the context of showing that they have bad moral character, or because they lie all the time. Lying is always going to be something that's relevant, or something within the context of the custody case. That's where you're going to want to use that information that you have about how that person is a narcissist. My son is going through a divorce with a narcissist. She's everything you described. He has 3 children and temporary 7 days with him and 7 with her. How to win in court against her. That is exactly what I teach you how to do in my SLAY program. I would just start by coming to my webinar. Have your son come to my webinar on Thursday. Because I talk a lot about that and how to create leverage and how to create your strategy. The webinar is free. It lasts about an hour. I give tons and tons of content. And then I do an extended version of the Ask the Attorney Anything. So check that out. If you can't come on a live basis, you can certainly get the replay if you don't, if it doesn't work out as far as time. That's definitely what I would do. So let's see. So somebody's saying, so agreements and family services can be entered into court orders. We ask a judge and they approve. Yes, that is the answer. So you just take your agreement and you say, you ask the judge, can you please order that this agreement becomes a court order? And now the judge has the power. So they're basically just ratifying your agreement. That's the terminology. They're ratifying your agreement. They're saying, yes, the court's ratifying and approving this agreement. And now the court has jurisdiction to modify, enforce it, or do whatever they want with it at that point. And that way, if the person doesn't do what they say they're going to do, then you can ask the court to hold them in, show cause why they shouldn't be held in contempt, or ask them to be held in contempt. Normally for financial orders, people aren't like put into, jail. There's no incarceration for not filing your financial documents or anything like that normally. But if they don't, then they can be sanctioned in several other ways depending on the laws in your particular area. Sometimes the sanctions can run from anywhere from attorney's fees to striking their pleadings to not allowing them to present certain things. I mean, the sanctions can be pretty harsh sometimes. And for a narcissist, one of the worst sanctions is just that they're like lashed out in court, that they're exposed, that they are now not being seen as the perfect one. They want the judge to think that they're perfect and you're the crazy one. So that's one of the best things that you get out of it, by the way. Let's talk about the slave program and how it
Yeah.
helped you, for sure.
Yeah. So in negotiation, it's really about give and take. And the more you know about the narcissist, the more you have to work with, because you know what they value. And first and foremost, they value their public appearance and the shiny things and being liked and adored by people. But then, they're also very sloppy, and they think they can lie their way through any and everything, and they're entitled to more than a normal person. And so these are, this is leverage. So, you strategize, right? And then you have leverage, and then you anticipate, and then focus on yourself. And so the slave program is really, um, I think one of the hardest things about this uh, engagement with a narcissist is most people never go to court. The majority of people never have to go to court for anything. The majority of people never even get like a traffic ticket. So those people that ever interact with the justice system are those people that get a speeding ticket, and then way below that are people that have to deal with like any kind of litigation. So it's very intimidating, and just but it's necessary. So the necessity of that, getting an overview of how that process works, is one of the first things that's really important of the slave program, because people who have been really put in a box don't know their power and don't know how to access the system and how to get change. So that is really helpful first and foremost. And then L, or leverage, is what are the things that are going to balance the scales in your favor. And the anticipation is, what are the things that this person has said to me over and over again? What am I likely to expect? And so I'm definitely in that phase now, 3 years on, of just like, oh, every time, well, I don't say every time, but it's like, I can predict that this is what I'm going to hear because I've heard it many, 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 many times. And it actually is kind of like, I wouldn't say it's like a game, but it's definitely a reward mechanism where you say your piece, and then when you get the response that you expected, it's like, yes, this person has not changed, this person has not matured in any way, shape, or form. um but just to be able to know who you're dealing with, that anticipation is really important, to not ever expect this person to be decent or kind or empathetic or generous or any of those things. It sucks. I mean, it's a really terrible, it's terrible, but you harm yourself when you expect different. And so when you can anticipate that this person is going to act a certain way regardless of how you show up, and that's why that 50 phrases to disarm a narcissist form was so vital, because it's like, I already know what they're going to say and what needs to be responded, what response I need to give them. So and then you obviously is the person you're in control of. you know uh I It's like, in a situation with a narcissistic partner, ex-partner. I've had a number of narcissistic bosses. I had two really narcissistic bosses in a row. I've been independent, but like the two bosses that I worked with were super narcissistic. And it's like, you show up and you build yourself up, and you never going to change this person. I'm not the best at managing up, but it's like, just know that this person's never going to change. uh, and you can't change them. The next person's not going to change them either, but you can change you, and you can change you every day a little bit. And there's another book that I love called Atomic Habits, and it doesn't
Mhm.
exactly relate to narcissism, but it's just like, when you think about each action as an investment in your future self, then you can break out of narcissistic patterns really, really quickly, because you're like, hey, I can control this, or I'm doing this, and this tiny little thing, drinking one more glass of water a day or doing 10 push-ups a couple times a day, transforms me into this version of myself. And the narcissist wants you to be a smaller and smaller version of yourself. But when you realize that just these little things that you can do from day to day make you the person that you most desire to be, it's a total game changer.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm so glad that it was so helpful for you. I mean, it's exactly what I wanted, it's exactly what I envisioned.
Hmm.
I mean, it was transformational for me as well, being able to kind of figure out, I mean, I had been helping people negotiate for years and years and years.
Hmm.
And honestly, I didn't know anything about narcissists, even though I had been dealing with them in a negotiation setting for
Sure.
years. It wasn't until I had dealt with one as a business partner and then started reading hundreds of books on narcissism.
Hmm.
And then I started applying what I was learning about narcissism to the cases that I mean, I was still practicing at the time. And I thought, it was like I had discovered penicillin,
Oh,
seriously.
totally, totally. The
Um,
thing is, it's like, what's so insidious is that nobody believes it at first, but then, if the whole world was full of narcissists, society would completely crumble. Human civilization needs people to be honest and to be empathetic, and to care about other people. And narcissists are so good at exploiting that, because
mm,
on a day-to-day basis, you just have an expectation that, unless someone is like carrying a knife or doing something out and out dangerous, that you can probably expect them to be thinking about you as much as you're thinking about them. And if everybody in society was looking to stab you in the back the minute your guard was down, we would have no society, or we'd have no, there'd be no, there would be no, it would just be complete chaos. But the fact is that a narcissist is an opportunist who is always looking to pick your pocket, always looking to get over on you, get over on everybody, and thinks they can, and they're actually very accomplished at it because they've been doing it their whole life. And so
yeah,
that's why they hide in plain sight. But
yeah,
like you said, they're predators. It's like,
yeah,
that's how I explain it to you, is like, they have this really predatory and parasitic behavior where they just see everyone as a mark. And
correct.
so you don't really realize how you're being roped in to a narcissist's game, because you just assume that, of the thousands of people you've met in your life, you've only met or acknowledged a few narcissists. But the fact that they're so, you know, they're like goblins, right? They're really just like,
Right. And
you
and
know,
one of the things that you just mentioned that I wanted to actually come back to, um, that I've kind of had an aha moment about
mhm,
since I've been doing this work is that um, there's something around 85% of cases in family law settle out of
mhm,
court. And so, conversely, that means that, 10 to 15% of cases go to trial,
mhm,
right? I have had this aha moment that roughly 10 to 15% of the population is what they estimate to be narcissistic. And I have come to realize that I don't think that those numbers are an accident,
Mm.
because I believe that I that there's a correlation there.
Totally. Yeah.
I believe that the cases that aren't settling are the ones that have a narcissist involved.
Sure. Sure. Because who else wants to keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back?
Correct.
And yeah, I mean, so this is like a Tina Swithin thing. It's like you can't just call someone a narcissist in court because there is no place for that. But
No. So what I tell people all the time, because I do know for sure that I'm the most um, prominent, at least the most the lawyer that's the one that has the most visibility right now,
mhm,
um, out there, the one that is that you have to you can't just say the person's a narcissist, because judges don't care about that, in
mhm,
the sense that there you, you can't tie that to law.
mhm,
And what the judges care about is the law,
right.
because that's what they're tasked to do.
Mhm,
Okay, so you have to put it in terms that the judge can tie it to. And what the judges are tasked to do is make a decision based in the law.
mhm,
So you have to find a way to tie it back to the statute.
mhm,
And so when people say, oh, they don't care, they don't care, they don't care, it's not that their job to make a decision based on empathy.
mhm,
Oh, yes, honey,
mhm.
they're a narcissist. Well, that it's not a conversation that they're supposed to be having.
Right,
They're
right,
supposed to make a decision based in the law.
right.
That's their job.
And someone else would have to make the same decision based on the same evidence. It's not that they're a human standing in for the law. They're not
Their
it's not
job
like you said,
is
it's not
to
a
be
conversation.
the
Yeah.
law.
Yeah.
That's their job.
Mhm,
So the law is the law, and it's
mhm.
written down.
Right.
And
And
so
when you
you
read the transcripts, it says the court, it's not
court.
they're
Correct.
talking about themselves in the abstract.
Correct.
No.
So you can't look at the judge as,
And expect them to get it. It's like you have to
oh,
show a
gee, they
pattern
don't
of this
care. You
behavior.
have to
Yeah.
put it in terms, because the judge has a job to do, and the judge needs to keep that job, and the judge is going to be um, critiqued on that job, and the judge
Hmm.
could be appealed, or that and if they don't make a decision based in that law.
Yeah.
And so you have to put it in terms that the judge is going to care about. And how that happens is you go, okay, California law has 10 factors or 18 factors or
Hmm.
whatever it is.
I think it's 13.
But whatever it
Yeah.
is, I don't know. I
Uh,
know Florida has 17
yeah.
factors, but so you just you go, okay, what's the first factor? Which parent is more likely to foster a close and continuing relationship with the other parent, or whatever the
Hmm.
factor says. And if that factor doesn't, if you can figure out a way to shove narcissism under that factor, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
And that's how you get the judge to care.
And without going down a rabbit hole, the last hearing,
That's what I teach in the slave
yeah.
program, by the way.
And without going down a rabbit hole, what's fascinating about it is that the case right before ours was a high net worth couple divorce. And the attorney for the respondent told the judge, oh, well, this is too complicated for you to understand. And it was kind of this like, you know, needle skipping over the record. The judge was like, no, this is absolutely not too complicated. And I treat all people under the law the same, because it was just like a millionaire divorce. But he was like, no, I get exactly what's going on here. I take umbrage to that statement. But then we were next in our situation. So it's like, here's a judge who from one breath to the next is dealing with like division of millions of dollars of assets and multiple properties. And then it's like, the custody situations, like narcissism really doesn't mean anything to the judge when the judge has to deal with like these like property divisions and custody time and things like that. So it's just like, again, it's really like, what is the evidence the judge is gonna make a decision based upon?
Right. Right. And so that's how you get the judge to care.
Yeah, that's how you get the judge to care. And it's like, it's this whole unwinding process, because going from feeling so like this person was mistreating me so terribly and starting fights at 3 o'clock in the morning and, all of this, to how to present this to a judge so that a judge can make a ruling, and successfully presenting, to the judge was a very, again, I credit the slave program tremendously, because it's like the thing that a narcissist wants more than anything is to get you to argue with them, to get you to defend yourself, to see the world through their very skewed prism. And, that can really cost you when you are in front of a judge, especially if you have written communication, because that communication can then be presented as an exhibit. And so, there's other people like Bill Eddy, who wrote Biff and, Splitting, and some of these other ones, who he's a psychologist and a lawyer. And, it's just like Biff stands for brief, informative, friendly, and factual.
And firm.
And it just like,
Yeah. And firm.
firm. Yes. Brief, informative, friendly, and firm, or factual and firm. But just the idea, friendly and firm. Okay. So just get to the point, say nothing more than you need to say, and becomes a muscle, so it's like, there's these narcissistic muscles that you have to train. And, the unfortunate thing is you get to train them every single day or almost every single day, especially if you are co-parenting, and again, like in my situation, it was just like, oh, why is this so hard? It's so hard every day. This sucks so much. Why can't this person just be decent? Like I'm so over fighting, and just want to go on with my life. And it's like, no, don't go on with your life. I want you to be, beholden to me or thinking about me in some way, shape, or form every day. And it's like, a healthy person doesn't think that way. A healthy person wants to get on with their life and live their life fully. And it's just like, so that's the hard thing to come to grips with. And nobody's going to understand it unless they've been in the situation. But if you have been in the situation, you're just like, yes, and I know you have got a Facebook community. It's like totally, rocking, because there's so many people that want to be in
almost
fellowship.
100,000 people now.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
People who just get it, and when people share their text message conversations and things like that, just like, wow, been there, done that. So, but then it's like this virus of narcissism out there in the world. It seems to be really infecting almost as many people as COVID. So that's it's like, that's the next frontier, is how to inoculate society against narcissism, when social media and, YouTube and politics and, just there's so many outlets for narcissism to really flourish. And so, and it just causes so much damage to so many people. So, and no surprise that you have 100,000 people in your community, and, such a prolific YouTube channel, and, the courses, and now doing these big arena talks.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are concerned that the narcissist is going to lie to the judge over and over again. And I've seen them lie.
Right.
And I've seen them get away with their lies.
Right.
And, there have been times when I've seen them say one thing and then 20 minutes later on the stand say something different. And yet the judge ruled for them. I mean, as a lawyer, it can be very frustrating myself.
Very.
well. You know, and I think, did you not just notice the inconsistency over there? Like, what's going on? But a lot of people are concerned. And so I would love for you to weigh in on what advice you would give to people who are going, I feel like I can never win because they're just going to lie.
Um, Hopefully most judges will, because especially if you lie early and we catch you, you're like, we don't, it diminishes the trust we have in you altogether once we're caught in a lie. So the calm and continued exposition of what is going on by the attorney, and sometimes you got to remember, it took you a minute to figure out that he or she was a narcissist to begin with. And it's going to take the judge a minute as well.
Oh, that's so true. That's a really good
See what I'm
point.
saying? When you met him and married him.
That's so true. What a really good point. That is such a good point. And what I tell people to do is, create summaries of their lies and inconsistent statements, like have a text message that says this on one day and another thing that says this. And it makes it easy for the judge to go, oh, okay, I can see the story here. Right. So would you agree with that? That's helpful.
Oh, absolutely. Consistent papering of what is occurring, and to put it in, because you 20 minutes on my docket today. So if you put it in, if it's just all over the place, I can't get there with you. But if it's concrete for me, I can get there.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love that. And so, okay, so here's another question that I get a lot. People think the judge, they've been in front of the judge a couple of times. Maybe it's been on a discovery motion, or maybe it's been on a motion to compel, or a motion to enforce an order, or something like that. And the judge has ruled against them. So now they think that the judge is favoring the narcissist, that they're biased, they want to get rid of the judge or whatever. What would you say to that?
Always talk to your attorney first, because there's a lot of reasons you can lose a motion, and not necessarily be a function of a factual determination made in favor of the narcissist and against you. There could be legal reasons why it is. And so really talk to your attorney, and talk to your attorney with the understanding that you're trying to determine what it was that made the motion unsuccessful on your part, because you'll go first to the thing that bothers you the most, which is their narcissism. But you have to be able to really understand. Sometimes you lose a motion because of the legal particulars of it, and sometimes it's because of the lie the narcissist told. But in order not to get consumed by that, you have to really listen to your attorney and come to the attorney with a clear head about, I'm going to accept what he or she is telling me about the reasons that our motions were denied or granted.
And it's not always the end of the story either.
Nope.
I mean, because, as you go in front of the judge more and more, oftentimes it gets turned around. Oftentimes the judge—
Patterns emerge.
Say it again.
Patterns emerge.
Exactly. And the judge starts to see, but it's really hard. And I want you to speak to this as well, which is, if somebody just comes in and says that person is a narcissist, what would you say to that?
I need evidence. I don't need conclusions. And I think that some people do come up with that person's a narcissist, and they could be a jerk or a fool. They're different levels of jerkdom. And, you not necessarily diagnosable just because you're some level of a jerk. So don't come in screaming the concern of the day. Narcissism isn't the concern of the day, but it's the new.
It's the word du jour.
Yeah, it really is.
It's saying it. And so, and what I tell people is that, it's almost like two kids fighting, like if you're a parent and both kids come in, she started it, no, she started it, no, she's the jerk, no, he's the jerk. But the judge is just like, oh, both of you stop it.
So don't come in here making diagnoses, because don't come in crazy. Come in calm with me. If you come in all wild and out with all of the extremities, you know, you got to come in cool, because I will listen longer and harder.
Oh,
And if
so good.
you're normally a rational and calm person and there's some excitation later on, I will see it more as a circumstance that arose as a function of events, as opposed to tag you with hysterical, crazy dude or chick.
Love that. And that actually brings me to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. You are an expert in emotional.
You know, one of my favorite holiday traditions is baking cookies with my daughter. We've done it every year since she was little. And now, even though we're miles apart, I can see those memories come to life again right here on my Aura frame. What if you could give a gift that brings your holidays to life all the time, every single day? And with an Aura frame, you can. I absolutely love how easy it is. You can preload the photos before you ship it as a gift, and then you can actually remotely continue to add to it. It includes photos and videos, all for free, and it comes packaged in a beautiful gift box, no price tag. Can't wrap togetherness, but you can frame it with Aura Frame. And for a limited time, you can visit auraframes.com and get $45 off Aura's best-selling carver mat frame, named #1 by Wirecutter, using the promo code Rebecca at checkout. That's auraframes.com. Promo code Rebecca. This exclusive Black Friday Cyber Monday deal is their best of the year, so order now before it ends, and make sure you mention the show when you go to checkout. Terms and conditions apply.
Now, if you're getting ready to go to court with a narcissist, whether it's divorce court or otherwise, you're going to want to be fully prepared, and you're definitely not going to want to walk in without having the best possible strategies and tactics at your fingertips, because this is going to be no cakewalk. The narcissist is going to make it as difficult for you as possible. So stay tuned and listen to the end so that you can get all the tips and you'll be all ready to go. All right, number one is have everything that's possible to be in writing, because narcissists by their nature are pathological liars. So they are going to lie about things that you said, you didn't say, conversations that took place or didn't take place, what they said or didn't say. Whatever it is, it's going to be twisted, it's going to be manipulated. So you want to make sure that you can keep everything in writing to the extent that that's possible. So, and ideally it would be like in an email or something like that, where you actually have the timestamp on it, you have the date stamp on it, you have the email, who it came from, the email address of who it came from, who it went to, that sort of thing. Text messages are admissible in court nowadays, but it's just a little bit more difficult to authenticate them when it comes to evidence in court. So it is better if you can do it via email if possible. The other problem with text messages is that they tend to go away after a certain period of time. And especially if you don't save them, it's really difficult to go back and find them. The phone companies don't even really keep them either. So you're definitely going to want to make sure that you use email if possible. If you're co-parenting, having a co-parenting app such as Talking Parents or Fair or Our Family Wizard, something like that is always a good idea too. I mean, the bottom line is that they're going to try to get you away from this writing. They don't want to be in writing because they know that it will box them in, and narcissists don't want to be boxed in. So they're going to do whatever they can to get you to meet with them, to go against what you said before, things like that. They're just, you know, let's just meet. We don't need the writing. We don't need all these other people around us. You know, let's just meet at Starbucks or whatever. And the reason why they're doing that is to get you into a place where they can manipulate you again. So by keeping everything in writing as much as possible, you can minimize that problem. Now, what the flip side of this, by the way, is for you to remember that every single writing is a potential trial exhibit. So if you don't want to see it again, then don't put it in writing.
the way I just say it to people is, just imagine the judge is leaning over your shoulder and watching you write that text or that email. And before you hit send, say, Judge, Your Honor, is this something that you would want to see? And if it's not, then you don't want to send it. Okay, the second thing that you're going to want to do is use video for depositions. And the reason why you're going to want to do this, and yes, it's a little bit more expensive. You have to pay for the court reporter. Now you have to pay for the videographer. But it goes back again to boxing that narcissist in. If you box them in enough, then they will act like the spoiled temper tantrum child, and their true colors will show up, and you'll be able to use that against them down the road. So, but just trying to control their behavior using video will definitely help, because if you don't use video, what they tend to do is do things that don't show up on the record, meaning the court reporter will take down everything that's actually said in the deposition. When you look at the deposition transcript, it'll just say question, blah, 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 answer, blah, blah, blah. There's nothing around it. There's no description given around it. So if that narcissist is giving you dirty looks, making faces, all the things that they do, and they do, then nothing is taken down. Now, for me as a lawyer, there have been many times where I've had to say, let the record reflect that so-and-so is making faces at so-and-so. But, how many times can the lawyer do that over and over again without just constantly interrupting the deposition? So by videoing it, you actually see how they're responding and how they're acting. Plus, it makes them behave a little bit better because they're a little less likely to be a complete jackass if there's a video shining in their face. If this is all sounding really good to you so far, put a thumbs up in the comments. Okay, number 3 is focus on your own case. So this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see lawyers make. I see lots and lots of people make, because it's just natural to want to focus on what's the other side doing and all of their flaws and all of their mistakes, and how is he or she getting away with this, and look at how badly they're behaving, and isn't the judge going to see that? And the answer is maybe and probably, and yeah, you will want to bring out all of the other bad behavior of the other side. But, just like in football, if all you have is a good defense and you have no offense whatsoever, then you never score any points, right? So you want to make sure that your case is as strong as possible. Focus on your case. Make sure that the facts and the supporting documentation and everything is done to create your case, and make sure it's super strong. And then for the other side, you create that leverage to help motivate them into wanting to come to the table to potentially have a settlement conversation with you. Or, you have all the points that make them look bad. Yes, anything that shoots their credibility. When people say, oh, how are they getting away with this? They're lying all the time. How are they getting away with this? So the thing I want you to remember, here's a good reality check for you, and that is, who would stop them from getting away with something? The only person who has any power over another human being in the court system is the judge, not the lawyers, not you, not family members. No one has the power to order someone to do anything other than the judge. And how do you get in front of the judge? Through motions, through hearings, through trials, things like that. Things have to be filed in the court system, and then you have to have a hearing, bring it to the judge's attention, and only at that point can you potentially rein in their behavior. But while you're waiting for that time to get in front of the judge, you're just documenting, you're keeping track, keeping track, keeping track. So that's how you're building your case. If you're dealing with a child custody situation, for example, and the person just never shows up to get the kids, or they show up late, or they constantly change the time, you just document it, document it, document it. And then when it comes time to present that to the court, you have a nice log of exactly what happened and when, what time did they show up, what time did they leave, you know, all of that. So eventually it will work in your favor. But just remember that you want to keep track of your own case and make sure that that is bolstered as much as possible, and then highlight the weaknesses of the other person as well. Okay, number 4 is what I started to allude to in number 3, which is document, document, document. And I cannot stress this enough. Keep really careful notes. Have an app open on your phone. Have a journal, a log, whatever you need to do so that wherever you are, real time, you can be logging what's happening. And I have won entire cases on these types of logs. Let me tell you, they do work. It is critically important. So make sure that you're documenting, because what you're doing is you're slowly closing in on your narcissist from every angle. It's you know, this is war. This is the art of war. And so you're building these tactics, and you're closing in on them from various different angles. And it doesn't look like you're doing much until you've got them fully surrounded. And that's when you realize, hey, I have them. And only then is when they're going to want to start to have a conversation with you about potentially settling the case, and not having to go to court, because you know that the main thing about a narcissist is that they don't want to look back. I have a lot more on this in my videos on how to negotiate with a narcissist and how to negotiate with a narcissist X, and I will drop links below to those videos. You'll definitely want to check those out. Okay, number 5, definitely do very thorough research. Have everything ready to go. Do you need appraisals? Do you need valuations? Do you need a forensic accountant? Do we need to figure out what the person's true income is by looking at their bank records? Do we need to figure out a lifestyle analysis by looking at credit card statements and bank statements and things like that? Everything needs to be ready to go, all I's dotted, all T's crossed. Don't leave any stone unturned. Don't leave anything to winging it, because whatever your weaknesses are, wherever there's that weakness in your case, that's where they're going to find you, and that's where they're going to jam their foot in and open that door and make it into a big, huge thing. So also, in being prepared, you're going to want to make sure that you do all the research for the other side. What are they going to argue? What points do they have against me? What leverage do they have against me? And then be ready to answer that. I anticipated this argument, and here's my response. Because if you're only prepared for your side, then you are only half ready to go. So make sure that you are ready for both sides, as if you're preparing for both sides. And one word about leverage, by the way, is make sure that once you've got that leverage, you use it at the most opportune time. Do not give it away too early. Do not show it to them before you get to court, because you want to use it when you need it. All right, so the last one, number 6, is to keep your emotions in check. And this is going to be one of the hardest things to do, because narcissists know how to push your buttons and they know how to manipulate you. So they're going to make faces, they're going to make little snarky comments, they're going to say things under their breath. And, you know, so I would totally avoid making eye contact with them in the courtroom. It's not going to serve you. Just look at the judge. When you're testifying, just look at the judge. Make sure that you've practiced your testimony. I, as an attorney, go over my direct testimony with my clients. If your attorney doesn't do that as a matter of course, ask your attorney to do that with you, or ask them for the questions and have somebody else practice it with you. You want to just be able to at least control the parts that you can control, which is your direct testimony. You should basically know what those questions are going to be. Your attorney will be asking you those questions, and be ready with what you're going to say, so that you're not stumped and you're not feeling nervous and anxious. You know exactly, okay, this is that question. Here's how I planned to respond to it. I mean, of course, you're going to answer truthfully. You just want to be prepared on how you're going to word your answers, how you're going to say it, what things you want to make sure to get in, what things you want to make sure to say, things like that. So, so that's your direct testimony. Now, as for your cross-examination, you should also see if your lawyer, I know I usually do this as a matter of course. I tell my clients what to expect for cross-examination too. I even sometimes get another lawyer in my office to do a mock cross-examination with the person and sort of beat them up a little bit, just so that they're ready. You know, the kinds of questions that I would ask under cross-examination, something like that. So the more you can be prepared, the less emotional you will be, the less anxious you will be.
5 ways to make sure that you beat a narcissist in court. So you're going to want to make sure you stay till the end. You're going to want to make sure that you save this video. You're going to want to make sure you share it out. You're going to want to make sure that you go ahead and watch it over and over again, because I'm going to give you all the ways to make sure that you beat a narcissist in court. Okay. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to remember the acronym, knock them dead. All right. So DEADD. So 2 D's, but DEADD, knock them dead. So the first D stands for document everything. And I mean everything. You know, you're going to want to journal everything. You're going to want to document everything. In my Slay program, I actually have 12 different things that you're going to want to be documenting, but you're going to want to document everything with regard to finances, to your children, if you have children, anything that they do that seems out of the ordinary. I know it's a pain, but you know, if you have a notes app or something, just note it, because you're not going to remember. But you know, even if it's crazy, oh, I don't know if I should write that down, but you know, you just never know. And there's many different ways that these things come into play. So you will want to make sure that you document everything, whether it's a business case or a family law case, or it's against a business partner. Maybe it's a case against an employer or something like that. It always is something that you're going to need to be doing, is documenting. Whether it's a timeline form, you end up needing it for the statutes to prove different elements of a statute. You definitely need documentation. I also have a podcast where I ended up interviewing one of the people who use my Slay for Biz program, Sharon Scott. I highly recommend that you check that out, because she talked about how she used my program and it really helped her a lot. So definitely document everything. The next thing is the E, emotions. Keep them in check. You're definitely going to want to keep your emotions in check. There's so many different reasons that you want to keep your emotions in check. I mean, for one thing is that they want to trigger you constantly. They love to see you squirm, so they get supply from it. And you really don't want to give them narcissistic supply, obviously, because that's no fun. I mean, they just get the satisfaction of seeing you go crazy, right? I mean, why do you want to do that? But then the next thing is that they use your reaction against you. They go, look, there's the crazy one. There's the one that's the problem. And they will use that against you in a number of ways. They use the emails against you, the texts against you. They may even be videotaping against you. They use the witnesses against you, whatever it is. So definitely keep your emotions in check. They use it for custody, so many different things. So definitely E, keep your emotions in check. And it doesn't help you when you're negotiating either, if you're all over the place when it comes to settlements, because then you end up settling for things that you regret 2 months down the road, 3 months down the road. You're like, I didn't want to settle for that. Because a lot of times you're like, oh, I just ended up settling for that because I just wanted it to be done. I just wanted it to be over with. Or maybe you were just feeling pressured. You know, really try to keep your emotions in check. And by the way, if you're really, really struggling with that, because a lot of times when you've been dealing with a narcissist for a long period of time, you are in a trauma state, especially PTSD sometimes. I do have a partnership with BetterHelp. You can go to betterhelp.com/Rebecca Zung. I do receive commissions on that. It doesn't cost you anymore. We have a partnership with them because I wanted to have a partnership with a service that we could trust, that we could recommend. If you are struggling, go to betterhelp.com/Rebecca Zung so that you can get the help and support that you need if you're having trouble with your emotions and you're having trouble with trauma. So that's the E. The next one is always wear the white hat. That's the A. Always wear the white hat. And what do I mean by that? I mean by that in that you want to be the one, if you end up in front of the judge, which that's what this is about, you want to be the one where the judge is like, hey, this is the person that obviously is the good one. Let the narcissist be the one who's badly behaving. A lot of times it's so easy to fall into, hey, they're behaving badly. They're doing things wrong. They did it too. I can do it too. What happens though is then you have a situation where the judge is just like seeing like two kids that are fighting. So for those of you who are out there watching who have children and you have more than one, what happens is they just are like, oh, both of you just stop it. You know, they don't see that, oh, well, they started it or they're worse. They just see two people who just are fighting. So you want to be the one who's consistently not being in the mud with the other one. Because if you are the one who's what I call always wearing the white hat, who's not engaging, who didn't respond, who didn't get into it, and the other one is always the one who's constantly the badly behaved one, then it makes it really, really obvious who is the bad one. And it's kind of hand in hand with keeping your emotions in check, but it's even one step much, much further than that. You really, really want to be the one who's just always behaving, always doing the right thing. So just kind of imagine that the judge is sort of walking around with you and watching every single thing that you're doing. Always wear the white hat. That's the A. All right. So the next one is don't go anywhere alone. That's the D, the first D in Knock 'em Dead. And we're going through all the elements of what to do to beat a narcissist in court. So, you know, this is because they're going to say you followed them, you did this, you did that. They lie all the time. So they're constantly going to be saying that you were menacing, that you were threatening, that you did this with the kids, or that you touched somebody inappropriately, or whatever it is that they make up constantly. And then you end up having to defend against these ridiculous claims. So you want to make sure that you have people around as much as you possibly can. If you have children, for example, have your exchanges for custody at daycares, at schools, you know, at shopping plazas or places where people are around, because you just don't want situations where they can make things up about what's going on. And in that same vein, by the way, you're going to want to make sure that even depositions are videotaped if possible. And I have actually a whole video on how to be a narcissist in mediation. I talk about that in there, and you should definitely check out that video as well, because a lot of you who are trying to beat a narcissist in court are also mediating with a narcissist, and you should definitely check out that video as well. And I also do have a whole video where I interviewed Judge Lynn Toller. You guys should definitely check out that video too. She was the judge on divorce court for 17 years, and her video interview was very, very highly fascinating. So definitely check that out too. And if you guys are so ready to knock them dead,
put knock 'em dead in the comments, because I'm so ready to help you knock them dead. And if you've been following along with how to beat a narcissist in court, and you've been following along with my acronym, you know there's one more D. The last D is decoys. It stands for decoys. And what I mean by decoys is you really do not want to give them your best offer or give them any of your best evidence or show them any of your cards or show them any of your hands until you're ready to unveil it in court or when you're ready. I mean, a lot of times while you're standing on the courthouse steps or even at lunch during the trial, they want to settle, they're ready to have settlement talks, or even maybe the eve before trial or a couple of days before, they're ready to have some settlement talks at that point or something. And you might be ready at that point as well, but you've got to have your strategy, your leverage, have anticipated, your focus on you, your position, that being on the offensive, my whole SLAY methodology. At that point, you do not give them your best offer. You do not show your best evidence. You decoy the whole thing until you are so ready to go. Basically, the way I look at it is you're building an invisible fence around them until you turn on the lights and they realize, oh my God, I'm totally pinned in. At that point, they have no choice but to resolve the issue with you or resolve the issues with you. So you're appearing weak, you're feigning ignorance, you know, oh, I don't know, I have no idea. Let them think that they're winning. Let them go all crazy on you. Allow them to go off. A lot of times that's good for you. It's hard, I know, because you don't want them to get away with anything a lot of times during the case. But sometimes if you have an ongoing case, it's good to let them screw up, because those little battles that show that they're screwing up help you to demonstrate to the judge who they actually are. So let them do that, you know, because then you can show patterns that they aren't doing what they're supposed to do, show patterns that they're liars, show patterns that they are bad parents or terrible with money or whatever it is that you need to show. It actually ends up helping you in the end, or that they have anger issues or whatever it is. So that definitely helps you. Sometimes it's really, really good to feign that you're weak, feign that you're ignorant. A lot of times, by the way, you can pretend like there's a particular thing that you really, really want, and it's not the thing that you really, really want, because then, you know, they go after that, you know, because they're going to go after the thing that they think that you really, really want, right? So let them go after that particular thing, right? What are your thoughts on the opposing side's tactic was to leave, set criminal charges, huge published smear campaigns, all for the purpose of separation? What's your opinion for best defense? Well, you've heard first of all, let me just tell you, I'm so sorry of what you're going through. It sounds like you're dealing with a malignant narcissist. Malignant narcissists tend to be the ones who are, you know, they don't even care. They have no conscience whatsoever. They'll just go after you and they'll say whatever they need to say. So what I'm going to say to you, Al, is your best defense is a good offense. For those of you who follow me regularly, you know that I often say that the best football teams, if they have a great defense, then they have nobody scoring any points. So you need to start going on the offensive. This is a person who has gotten you under siege. And that's what narcissists do. Like right out of the gate, they want to take that first swing. They want to make sure that you feel disempowered, that you feel like you can't ever get past all of this. I have had clients who have had criminal charges against them, who haven't seen their children for years. All of this bad stuff has happened to them. And then they come to my office
office and we get it all turned around. And the reason why I can get it turned around is because I help them create a strategy which will box them in. Remember, when you're talking about a narcissist, the most important thing to them is narcissistic supply. But when you're dealing with a narcissist and you're dealing with that narcissistic supply, remember that the supply that means the most to them is how they look, what people think of them. They want the rest of the world to think that they're wonderful, or that they're the victim and that you're the bad one, and they want to get that preemptive strike going in there. So they put you on the defensive right away. So what you need to do is create a strategy that's going to threaten a source of supply that means more to your spouse to keep than the supply that she's getting from making you miserable. And she's getting lots and lots of supply by watching you squirm, by watching, her be on top, or him, or whoever it is that's on the other side. And so that's what's really going on. And the beautiful thing about narcissists is that they are so simple to understand. They only want one thing, and that's supply. But they go after it in many different ways. But they're actually very, very predictable. They're very predictable in how they will act in any kind of a discard phase, but especially when they're dealing with somebody in divorce or end of a business partnership or anything like that. They fight dirty. That's what they do. They don't have ethics. They just, it's the equivalent of the kick in the groin, the pulling of the hair, the biting of the ear, whatever they have to do so that they can come on top. But you can develop a strategy which will allow you to box them in. And narcissists eventually do self-destruct. If you give them enough rope, they eventually get to a point where they start making mistakes, where they start coming unglued. They'll act like they're moving forward, and they're really good at this magical thinking and moving forward and not seeing their path of destruction behind them. But they will eventually self-destruct if you surround them and put them in a place where they have no choice but to resolve matters with you. And that's what I teach in the Slay program. That's what I teach on these videos. That's what I teach in everything that I do, because I figured it out. I figured out how to negotiate with them in a way that helps you see movement and get where you want to go. But, during the worst, most traumatic time of your life, you have to make the most critical decisions of your life. Mm-hmm. And so you're under siege, and it's bad enough when you're divorcing normally, but then when you add on the layer of divorcing a narcissist, now you're trying to make decisions about your money, your home, your children, all the things that mean the most to you, your business, potentially. While you're under siege and while you're trying to heal yourself. I mean, people who've been in narcissistic relationships for long periods of time are like PTSD. I mean, they're seriously, traumatized, and they're trying to make decisions. So, for example, this woman I spoke to this morning, she wants to change her custody arrangement. She said that, when she entered into the custody agreement at the time, she was so terrorized by him. She just wanted to get out of it. She just wanted to be done. And so she agreed to stuff that she didn't want, that she didn't, now she regrets, So what I'd like to hear from Tina is, how did you keep your mindset strong? How were you able to keep going and not give up and keep yourself healthy?
It was a process. The first few years, had I not been journaling and blogging about it, if I were to look back, I remember very little of it. I feel like I was operating in a state of trauma and shock and emotions. And for me, it was a few years into it before I started going to sit in the courtroom. And it was a way for me to learn about the process and how attorneys handle things and how different case law. And I became a fixture in the courtroom on days that it had nothing to do with me. And just there as an observer, because it allowed, first for me to desensitize myself, because it just became part of my so then walking into the courtroom when it was my own case, I was much stronger. And I was educated on what was going on, and the motions that I was filing. And I didn't get it right all the time, but it helped tremendously. And what I learned is that so much of it is about strategy, and judges and
Yeah.
attorneys, anybody in those courtrooms, they don't want to see your emotions. That was one of the things I learned quickly. Is I would walk to the bathroom in the courthouse and have a panic attack or vomit or break down crying, but when I walked through those doors, I had to, put my shoulders back and my head up, and, almost role play was kind of the
Yeah.
mentality I had to have. But, and just forming alliances when I would be in the courtroom and I would see another parent who I could, identify as the healthy parent in the situation, I'd follow them out into the hallway and say, here's my card. Sounds crazy. I'd love to go to coffee with you because we have a lot in common. And that started building my local team. So those were some of the things that I did in the beginning. And from day one, I remember people telling me, this is a 50-50 state. California, I think every state is 50-50 at this point. And that's, truly what you just have to accept that. And I refused. I couldn't even grasp how somebody could, some people, it's truly, their exes are so good at impression management that that may be in the cards for them. And then you're forced to accept radical acceptance, managing your expectations, that whole thing. But for me, I couldn't accept that was what was best for my kids. And that was the mentality I kept moving me forward, and really celebrating the little victories, which I consider to be anytime my kids are a little bit safer. And that just kept the momentum going until I think it was about year 6 that we were assigned a custody evaluator, and he really understood what I was up against. And his orders or his recommendation to the court were unlike anything I've ever heard of before. And it was so strict. And the judge ended up saying, I'm not going to adopt all of these because I don't want to micromanage this guy. But the ultimate ruling on year 6 was permanent supervised visits. So he could never again be alone. And the judge said, I intend for these to be final custody orders, which was huge. But as we know, a narcissist can't handle that. Their ego doesn't want someone supervising them. That's a huge threat. And so he jumped ship, and we didn't hear from him for a year and a half. But that was a year and a half of peace. And I
Yeah.
was fantastic. So it's those baby steps. It's, what, today my kids are a little bit safer, and that kept me going. And when I did, there were so many times where I threw myself a huge pity party when I got slammed in court, and I just always set an end time. I can allow myself a day or two to be mad or angry because it's warranted. But then, Friday, I'm going to dust myself off and I'm going to try again because my kids need me. There's no one else that's going to fight for them.
Absolutely. I just want to inject a little bit of the legal side of some of the things that you just said. And one is that, yeah, there is a kind of unspoken presumption, I'll call it, for this 50-50 thing right now in most of the states. I think there are a couple of holdouts. I think New York doesn't quite have that presumption yet, but it's not necessarily a legal presumption, meaning a legal presumption would mean that when the court sits down, when the judge sits down, then they're going to presume that this is what it's going to be. And then the other person who doesn't want that has the burden of proving why it shouldn't be that. So that would be a legal presumption. So it's not necessarily a legal presumption in a lot of the states, but it's kind of like an unspoken presumption. And so what I want people to remember is that what the real presumption is and should always be is best interest of the child. And I just had a situation with this with the judge back in January. I was at a hearing, and the judge, the baby at the time was maybe 5 months old or something like that. And the judge was like, well, you know, you guys are coming to trial in May. So, you know, don't bother coming in here if, you know that it's going to be 50-50 and whatever. And I'm like, really, Your Honor, before you even hear one word about what's in the best interest of this child, you know that there's 18 factors in the statute that you're supposed to consider. So if you're making a decision right here and now, then that's grounds for your recusal. And so, you know, right away, he's like, oh, of course, we have to, you know, consider the factors. And, you know, and of course, he backpedaled right away. But, you know, I want people to understand that, yes, it's that, but don't just give up on that. Don't just say that's what it is and be resigned to that. Remind the court, remind the judge, remind everybody you can that the standard is best interest of the child. And there is, I'm sure, a statute in every single state that has, you know, the factors that have to be considered by the court. So don't just like resign yourself to that's what it's going to be. So
Rebecca, I have a comment on that though, because despite that, the best interest of the child, you know, anyone who's, you know, doing advocacy work, mental health work, you've been in the divorce space, in almost all of these cases, I'm not willing to hazard a guess of 75 to 90% of these cases, they're not taking into account the best interest of the child. And these statutes and these 18 points and all this stuff can exist. And in that particular case, it might have even been easier because it was a 5-month-old baby. But when I am seeing over and over and over again is cases where there is no way on planet Earth that the best interest of this child is being accounted for. So even if that's written into the law, and I suppose, yes, it becomes one more grounds of which an attorney could attempt to push the point, I still feel like most judges are going to reject that out of hand because they still feel like the argument of a parent that's antagonistic and toxic and undermining and invalidating and alienating and all the things that they are, is that they're going to say there's no evidence of that. You know, I mean, the evidence that you'd have to show that it's not in the best interest of the child is often quite physical. Like you lived 20,000 miles from the kid's school, or you travel 3 weeks a month. They'll run with that. But these subtle psychological factors, which I don't even think are subtle, I am not seeing a judge in America account for this stuff.
yeah, I mean, that's the difficulty, right? Because it's like, it is so subtle and the judges are always looking for the easy way out.
Yes.
I mean, and so it is difficult. So what you have to do is you have to be able to present a case in such a way that they can't look away. And you can't go in and say the person's a narcissist or, you know, accuse them of any kind of something like that that's not readily supportable, you know, because that's when you're going to lose your own credibility, even if the person is the most flaming narcissist on the planet. So you have to go in with, you know, reams of supporting documentation as to what's in the best interest of the child. I mean, Tina's nodding her head because, you know, you figured it out. And I'm really amazed and give you such props that you were able to go in there and think of the idea of, I'm going to go watch other court proceedings and figure it out. You know, so talk more about like how you were able to do that, because, you know, there's so many people out there who can't afford a good lawyer, who can't afford, you know, a therapist. They can't afford anything. They're like, you know, you were talking about going to the food pantry or whatever. I mean, if it's like eating versus an attorney, you're going to pick eating. So talk more about that.
So, you know, I know one of the things I talk to parents all the time who will tell me, you know, I don't have time to go sit in the courtroom. You know, I tell them, you don't have time not to. I was working full time. You know, one of the things I didn't mention, when I left my marriage, you know, just so people don't, you know, go, well, you know, she has all these resources or whatnot. I left with $178 to my name, not a penny in retirement, not a penny in, you know, any type of account. literally under $200. And I was working full time. I had 2 little girls in preschool. The cost of preschool is insane when you've got 2 little ones. But I made that a priority. And, you know, however you have to do it, for me, that was the number one, you know, that was the best thing I could have ever done. It gave me so much insight into things attorneys used. And then I would go, you know what? And a lot of people, so, you know, how did you win based on him being a narcissist? I've never used that word. I've written 4 books on the topic, but I've never used that word narcissist to anybody. You know, I focused on his patterns of behavior that were
Exactly.
affecting my kids.
Exactly.
And, you know, and pain, you know, seeing, and one thing I don't think people understand, if I were in courtroom A, I would present my case, my exact case, one way. But if I were in courtroom B, just based on what I know about that judge, I would present my case completely different, because they're human. They bring in their own biases and
They do.
personal. You know, there's a judge down in Southern California who lost a child to a drug overdose. So she takes addiction issues very seriously. My ex-husband was an alcoholic, so you better believe I would hit heavy on the alcoholism in her courtroom. And I think people don't give that, you know, there's no rule book for any of this. And,
It's
you
so
know,
smart. So
So
smart.
smart. So smart.
thank you. So, you know, so much of it was learning, you know, so many learning lessons. And when I was in the hallways of the courtroom on break, I would make conversations with every attorney that would talk to me, and, you know, and you share my story. I couldn't afford their consults, but if they're bored sitting in the hallway, I would use that as an opportunity to introduce myself, let them know. And so many were so helpful to me through this process, you know, just really forming those connections, knowing who every single player is in your system. Every evaluator, you need a notebook of just family court professionals. Anytime you hear something about one of them, or you witness an evaluator testifying in court, or, you know, a minors counsel, write down every detail about them so you can make an informed decision. You know, if you are going to be assigned an evaluator. I think one of the things I was so naive about in the beginning, I was desperate for someone to listen to me. And so I would show up in court and I would beg, you know, appoint minors counsel, appoint an evaluator. Somebody's got to see what's happening. And if I could go back and do it all over again, I would have said, you know, here are my 3 selections for an evaluator. I don't care which anybody can choose from this list.
That's what
But
I
I
do.
would, yeah, exactly. And then it gives the other side the power and control that they need to make that decision. But like in my case, the minors counsel who was appointed, because I didn't know anything about him, he turned out to be a bigger narcissist than
Oh,
than my ex-husband in a lot of ways. And so it was a complete waste of time and energy and resources. And so really entrenching yourself in your system and learning the ropes and the people, you have to do it.
that's such great advice. Really, really great advice. You know, as you were talking, I was wondering if one of the other things that you did, because if you did, this would be a great idea. You know, if you know that there are particularly good lawyers or lawyers who understand, you know, what you're dealing with, you know, pleadings are actually public information. So did you go to the clerk and read motions and look at stuff that other lawyers had filed?
So if I saw a case that closely resembled my case, I would take down their names and go find them, because in our court, we're pretty archaic. We have like you have to get these little slides and you look
Oh,
at
okay.
all of the microfiche. And so I would go pull people's cases and just sit there and go through their whole case from
That's
start
what I
to
was wondering.
finish.
Yeah. That's exactly
Yeah.
what I was wondering that you did. Yeah. So that's so smart. Really, really smart. But of course, very time consuming,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So, um, so Dr. Romani, what would be, you know, ways that people can kind of self-care and cope during this process?
You know, Tina, what is so striking about what you just said, and just so everyone knows, Tina is actually literally one of my favorite people on the planet, and she knows that too. So I really, I know the depth of her story. Is that what's striking to anyone hearing this is that, and what I see in many of the clients I work with is that they get exhausted. They go to a place of full-on helplessness, hopelessness, and powerlessness, which are often some of the last stops on the train before full-blown major depression and anxiety disorders and all of that, like really major psychological and psychiatric, fallout from this. And as a result, the persistence you showed, Tina, is remarkable because, and what I love about what you did, Tina, was you weren't trying to control things you can control, namely judges who didn't get it, custody evaluators who didn't get it, court systems who didn't get it. You weren't trying to control those mechanisms. You were trying to learn about them. And of all the guidance I've ever heard, because you feel so powerless, give yourself the time to learn. Look up the cases, learn what happened in those cases, learn about the judges. I mean, I think that anytime we can give a person a sense of control, that's something they can actually do, is really, really important. But I do have to say, Tina, there's a unique resilience that you're manifesting, because I do think for people, the day in and day out, the demoralization, and no matter how much evidence they present to the court, it feels like no matter what, it's not working out their way, to the point where I've seen children who are, being forced to co-reside, and have custody with the more narcissistic parent, to the incredible detriment of the child's mental health. And the mother can't even make the argument in this case that really it is exposure to this toxic parent. I mean, he has completely worked that whole system beautifully. So to your question though, Rebecca, number one, I would say it's absolutely critical you reach out not only for therapy with somebody who gets narcissistic abuse. And I'm really put that point on it, because many, many times I actually don't think that clients in this space should be entirely targeted as though they have post-traumatic stress disorder. I think PTSD is a very different kind of phenomenology. And while addressing early traumas and all of that may be an issue, I think that there's something rather unique about the narcissistic abuse space, because it moves pretty quickly when a person gets lots of education. Because I am shocked in 4 to 6 sessions when a client really is helped to understand what happened, how their own early, their family of origin issues connect, and they see it, they're like, that's it. Like, I'm good. Thank you. I'm not a crazy person. Thank you. That's not how treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder works.
So good.
Yeah, it's very, very different. And now, are there many, many people out there who experience issues in their experience of a narcissistic divorce, physical violence, sexual violence, severe financial deprivation, coercive control, all things that are associated with PTSD? Absolutely. And I do think that is a subset of cases, but I think an even larger subset of cases are people who really are experiencing a more pure version of being absolutely confused by the manipulation. And once they simply get psychoeducation, which is how I got into putting out these YouTube videos, because not everyone could come sit in my office. There's just not even enough hours in the day for me to do that. I wrote books for this reason, thinking if people could get this, they may stop blaming themselves. So it becomes therapy with someone who gets it. Number two is also accessing the advocacy community. That is something Tina opened me up to, is that there are people like Tina out there who get it and put resources out in a way from a lived experience perspective. Her Facebook page is a robust resource that I refer all of my clients going through this to, and to her website. So those services exist, basically a support group mechanism of people who get it. But then beyond that, I really, really do tell people is that you are not defined by this experience. I actually think that survivors of narcissistic abuse who really then take this as a jumping off point, to the degree we're talking about it being a trauma, what I really do see is tremendous post-traumatic growth. People saying, I can see these people coming from a mile away. I am actually going to be a lot more careful in my relationships. I am getting rid of the people in my life who are not good for me. They actually do a whole clean out, like a toxic dump. They knock everyone out, because they're like, I'm not doing this anymore. And they realize how many people in their midst were the enablers of the narcissistic abuse. And through a good support network, therapy, advocacy, support groups, you get people who say, it's okay. It's okay to remove people from your life, because they'll get a lot of guilt. Like, how dare you not speak to this one? How dare you do you? And so it's very much it's a process of healing, which I've got to tell you, I have seen many, many people soar. They go back to school, they take on the careers they thought they wouldn't, they travel, they feel like better parents. I mean, they really do come out of it. But all of that said, it really is a daily practice. Things like mindfulness, meditation, getting also treatment for other disorders that may have come up or gotten exacerbated, anxiety disorders, depression, substance use disorders that can sometimes flare up in the face of all of this. It's about taking care of you. And also keep in mind, Rebecca and Tina, you know this very well, is that people who've been through a narcissistic divorce or a long period of narcissistic abuse in their lives, self-care for themselves is the first thing they threw out. They stop taking care of themselves. They'll often start eating more poorly, gaining weight, making themselves at risk for things like diabetes. They don't get their regular healthcare appointments. They don't take care of themselves because in some ways, staying in a narcissistically abusive relationship is so sort of self-harming that you're on like, why would I take care of myself? You know, it's like you're a car, you just drive into the ground at that point. And that awakening of getting out of that relationship is often an awakening that you're this beautiful soul, this beautiful creature that deserves to be taken care of. So it's lots of enlightenment, lots of awakening, lots of education, lots of support, lots of therapy. And again, slowly but surely going into a wiser future.
Yeah, that's such great stuff. Really, really good advice. And I just want to add in as far as like the legal perspective on this. Something that people can do is maybe if you can't afford to have a lawyer for the entire process, but maybe have a consulting lawyer, maybe somebody that you'd be willing to, if you have a little bit of money, you could go in and just make sure that, kind of like what Tina did when she was sort of having these hallway conversations. But, if you wanted to have somebody who was, taking a look at an agreement and maybe just reviewing an agreement for you and just spending an hour of their time doing that, something, where you get a little bit of that legal protection if you can afford to have even that. Obviously I have a program for that as well for people. And, but if there's a way that you can access some help, that's I think really, really helpful for people to have access to that.